This is the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 17. We're looking at the squads of the 2023 Gold Cup. This is the full-length version for Panama's players. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 17 on the players of the 2023 Gold Cup, and this episode covers Panama's players. So just a couple of notes before we begin. This media cast is in two parts. So in May, we are going to go over a list of the candidates available for the squad, and we're going to place them according to what we think is their likelihood of making it. And the second part will be done in June after the squad lists are released. And then this will let you know who among the candidates actually did make the team. Now, for our previous player podcasts, we did that in two separate parts, but we're combining them here. And for Panama, we did take a look at the players at the beginning of the final round of World Cup 2022 qualifying, but we didn't do them in World Cup because they didn't qualify, as we did with a few of the CONCACAF teams, the ones that made it to the World Cup. So that's what you can expect here. And also we organize this by position. So we do realize that this isn't always accurate because players do kind of change positions. But we'll try to be as accurate as we can. And there's always a few surprises. So we'll cover them as best as we can, especially in the second half of the show when we know what the selections are. Now, before we launch into the list of players here, I want to look at Panama's recent games because it's significant. For some teams, we've been looking at their recent lineups, which we decided wasn't very pertinent. But for Panama, I think their recent games are pertinent. So I'm going to put them up here on the visual for YouTube watchers, and I'll describe for listeners what we're seeing. And basically, it's a reverse order of their games. So most recent game on top. In fact, the Nations League final games against Canada hasn't been played yet. That's on top, and it goes back until the beginning of 2022. So actually, Panama has played more games than most CONCACAF teams, 18 games since the beginning of 2002. And they've been using those games to really try out a lot of players for the squad. So most of these are kind of irrelevant friendlies. But I will point out that the game in March 2023 against Guatemala, they were particularly trying out a lot of new players. And then the friendly against Bahrain in September 27th, also trying out a lot of players. Now, I didn't include in this list players that have only played in these games because there were just too many to try. But a couple of players did emerge from these games and played more recent games. So it gave Panama and us a few more players to look at, a few more candidates to look at. The other one was kind of odd. I thought it weird at the time that they had scheduled a game with Martinique on June 9th and a game with Uruguay on June 11th in 2022. June 9th and June 11th, because teams usually don't play two games in a row. And I believe the game in Uruguay was in Uruguay, so that would involve travel too. And what I realized after a while is that the Uruguay game was just being used to try out new players. So they brought a completely different set of players to that game. And again, some players have emerged from that. So that explains their two games in a row there. A real push to develop the squad with new candidates. Probably a good thing. I mean, definitely a good thing for Panama there. Okay, let's move on then and start looking at the candidates. Okay, so let's begin our look with the manager. And the manager remains the same for Panama. It's Thomas Christiansen. So Thomas Christiansen was the manager during the 2021 Gold Cup. And even though they didn't pass the group stage there, he remains manager. And he was, Panama is his first international team, but he coached a few clubs, including Leeds United in England and well, really in a bunch of different countries, but we won't go into detail. A Danish manager, Thomas Christiansen, leading Panama through this cup. All right, we look at goalkeepers, and we have one definite candidate. We have Orlando Mosquera. So Orlando Mosquera is 27 years old, and he's been with Panama since 2017 and has 12 caps. So he was actually the backup keeper in the 2017 and 19 and 2021 Gold Cups behind Luis Mejia. He wasn't called up to the World Cup, though, in 2018. And since we're kind of looking at recent participation from the start of 2022. So he has started 6 of their 18 games. Yes, they played 18 games since the start of 2022. Started 6 and was on the bench for 9 of them. So we consider Orlando Mosquera a definite candidate. That's not to say that we consider him a definite starter, because we have a likely candidate, Luis Mejia, who is generally the starter for Panama. Luis Mejia is 31 years old, and he's been with Panama since 2009 and has 49 caps. And he plays for Union Española in Chile and was with a couple of clubs in Uruguay before that. And I think I forgot to say Orlando Mosquera's club. He plays for Carabobo in Venezuela. A lot of these Panamanians really travel around from team to team. Anyway, back to Luis Mejia. So he was a backup keeper behind Jamie Pinedo for a long time, but in the 2019 Gold Cup, he got the starting position and was the starter in 2021 too. However, he started only 8 of their 18 games since the start of 2022, and he was on the bench for 2 and not selected for 8 others, including their last 6 matches. So we don't consider him as likely as Mosquera, and in fact, kind of worrying that he may be kind of leaving the team. But because he has been the starter for the last 2 tournaments, we're going to put him at the likely level here, but a bit of concern about those last 6 matches that he didn't show up for. And the other likely candidate is a new keeper for Venezuela, for Panama, not a young guy. It's Jose Guerra, and sorry, I'm just looking up his age here. He's 28 years old, and he's been with the team since 2020, so fairly new to the team with just 4 caps, and he's never been involved in a tournament. And in fact, recently he was off the team for 15 months, but he returned in September 2022 to start 3 of their 6 remaining games, and he was on the bench for 2 and not selected for the last match. So involved in 5 of their most recent 6 games. Those would be the 6 games that Luis Mejia was absent for. He plays for San Francisco in Panama, and we consider him a likely candidate, having participated a lot recently. Possible candidate is Emerson Dimas, and Emerson Dimas does not have any caps for the national team, actually, and is just 21 years old, and he plays in Panama, and obviously involved in no tournaments. He got his first appearance on the bench in March 2023, and he didn't start any of the remaining 3 games there, but he was on the bench for 2 of them. So a possible candidate. Again, a lot of this seems to hinge on whether Luis Mejia is going to be there or not. And finally, we have a possible but unlikely candidate in Jose Calderon. So Jose Calderon has been with the team since 2005, so a real veteran there. He's 36 years old and has 44 caps, and he plays for Zalaju in Guatemala. And he's been in and around the team for a long time, since the 2005 Gold Cup. And he's been involved in every tournament, but usually on the bench. In fact, almost always on the bench. But in the 2019 and 2021 Gold Cups, at least, he appeared in game 3 of each. Both of them were B team games there. And however, he last appeared for the national team in January of 2022, so hasn't played for the team for a year and a half now. So Jose Calderon possibly on the way out. We consider him possible but unlikely. Okay, moving on to defenders. We begin with central defenders, and we have a definite candidate in Fidel Escobar. So Fidel Escobar has been with Panama since 2015, and he's 28 years old, and he's been used a lot. He has 66 caps in that time and 2 goals. He plays for Alcoron in Spain. That was a recent move there, because he did play for Sporting San Miguelito in Panama for a long time, for about 6 years before moving to Spain. In 2020, though, so he's been there for a while. He's been involved in Gold Cups. Well, we're just going to focus really on the recent Cups. He was a starter in the 2018 World Cup and the 2019 Gold Cup. However, he was not selected for the 2021 Gold Cup. He was on the preliminary roster but didn't make the final cut. Otherwise, he's been used a lot. He started 13 of their 18 games since the start of 2022, subbed in for 1 and not selected for 4 others. So if he was kind of out of the picture for the 2021 Gold Cup, he is certainly back. And we consider Fidel Escobar a definite candidate for making the squad. And we have a likely candidate in Harold Cummings. So Harold Cummings has been with the team since 2010. And is 31 years old, and he has even more caps, 87 caps and 1 goal, and he plays for Monagas in Venezuela and has been kind of playing all over South America since 2021, since 2020, Chile, Bolivia, Colombia, and now Venezuela. And he's been around for a long time, but again, we'll focus on maybe from the World Cup on. So he was on the squad for the World Cup, but just a substitute. He appeared in game 3 there, subbing in at halftime. And then he was a starter in both the 2019 and 2021 Gold Cups. However, in the 2021 Gold Cup, where he was a captain, by the way, the captain of the team, he started games 1 and 2, but was subbed out 35 minutes into game 2 with an injury that ended his tournament. Since then, he started 6 of their last 18 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2, and then not selected for 9 or for half of the 18 games there. So we consider Harold Cummings a likely candidate. Okay, we have 3 candidates at the possible level. The first is Anderson Eduardo, and he's been with the team just since 2022, and he is 22 years old, and he has 6 caps and no goals, and he plays for San Carlos in Costa Rica, and he got his first cap in June of 2022, and only started 1 of their remaining 10 games there, but he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 4. So just a couple of matches there that he wasn't selected for. So we consider him a possible candidate. Also new to the team in 2022 is Jose Cordoba. He has been with the team. Oh, sorry, I said 2022. He has 4 caps for the national team and is 22 years old also, just like Eduardo Anderson there. And he interestingly plays for Levski Sofia in Bulgaria since 2022, moving there after being loaned from his Panama team, he moved there. And he got his first appearance on the bench in March 2022, and he started 2 of their remaining 14 games, subbing in for 2 and on the bench for 2 there. So, yeah, not called up again about half of the time like Eduardo Anderson. And finally, we have Edgardo Farina. He's even newer to the squad. Since 2023, he got his first cap, and he has 2 caps and is 21 years old, and he plays for Universitario in Panama. And March 2023 was when he got his first cap, but he did start 2 of their remaining 3 games there, but he wasn't selected for the other. So we consider all 3 of these candidates, Eduardo Anderson, Jose Cordoba, and Edgardo Farina, about the same level of possibility of making the squad. Now we do have a few kind of unlikely players. Richard Peralta is possible but unlikely. He's been with Panama since 2014, but has really struggled to kind of get a place in the team. At 29 years old, he just has 15 caps and 1 goal, and he's played in Panama for his whole career. So he made the preliminary squads for the 2015 and 2017 and even the 2018 World Cup, but didn't get on the squad any of those times. Wasn't even selected for the Gold Cup squad in 2019, but then he was in the 2021 Gold Cup, where he was a starter, starting and finishing games 1 and 3 there, just subbing into game 2. And he returned actually after a 20-month absence in March 2023. So even after the Gold Cup in 2021, he wasn't being considered by the squad. And he started 1 of their remaining 2 games and was on the bench for 1 other. So kind of returning to the squad very late. But we consider Peralta, Richard Peralta, an unlikely candidate. Carlos Harvey, also an unlikely candidate. He's been with the team since 2019, and the 23-year-old has 3 caps and 1 goal, and he's with Phoenix Rising in the USA. And he started 1 of their 18 games at the start of 2022, but then he wasn't selected after that. So just got a kind of a quick look in on the squad, but he is young and maybe will come into the picture more down the road. That's Carlos Harvey, possible but unlikely candidate. And finally, at the same level, we have Gilberto Hernandez. So Gilberto Hernandez got his first cap in 2023, and he has 2 caps now. He's 25 years old and plays in Panama, and he got his first 2 appearances on the bench in 2020, so he has been around for a while, but then he was off the team for 3 years and returned in March 2023 with his first cap. So I think he was just tried out for the team, and is an unlikely candidate, Gilberto Hernandez. Okay, let's move on to left back. So our first left back is a likely candidate, and it is Eric Davis. Eric Davis has been with the team since 2010, and he's 32 years old with 77 caps and 5 goals. I think he's the penalty taker, or at least I've seen him take penalties. And Eric Davis is unattached right now. He was with a team in Slovakia whose name I don't dare to pronounce. Okay, Donajka Streda. Hey, I think I did pretty well there. In Slovakia, all the way from 2015 to 2023, but recently is unattached. He's been involved in Gold Cup since 2011, when was a starter in the World Cup in 2018, and in the following 2 Gold Cups in 2019 and 2021. So a real stalwart for them. However, he's only started 7 of their 18 games since the start of 2022, subbed in for 1, and then was ill and injured for 3 games there, and not selected for 7 others. So not playing as much as one might guess. Eric Davis a likely candidate. A possible candidate, and we have two of them, are Roderick Miller, and we'll get to the other one after. Roderick Miller, also with the team for a long time, since 2011, and he's 31 years old. And so you can see actually by the ages here that they did need a bit of renewal. Which is probably why they did a big renewal project. Anyway, Roderick Miller, 35 goals and 35 caps and 2 goals, and he plays in Azerbaijan. As I said, some of these guys are globetrotters. He's also played in Iraq, Peru, and Kazakhstan. Has Roderick Miller, and he wasn't selected for the World Cup in 2018, was in a bunch of tournaments before that, as far back as 2013 Gold Cup, but he was, I think, off the team for a period, because I don't have any information on him for the 2019 Gold Cup. But anyway, he was back for the 2021 Gold Cup, where he was on the bench for game 1, but then gained a starting position for the following games. So he started 3 of their last 18 games, subbed in for 1, and not selected for 14 others, including the last 7 matches. So almost an unlikely candidate here, but we leave him as possible because he was part of the 2021 Gold Cup tournament. The other possible candidate is Andres Andrade. So Andres Andrade has been with Panama since 2018, and he's just 24 years old, so he got an early start there, just 20 years old, when he earned the first of his 23 caps. He doesn't have any goals. And he plays for Arminia Bielefeld in Germany since 2022. I think that's actually his second stint with them. Oh, no, he was loaned to them. And he also played in Austria there. He hasn't been a part of the of any tournament yet. He was a consideration for the 2021 Gold Cup, in fact, selected for the final squad, but got injured before the tournament, so couldn't play. He was actually replaced by Roderick Miller, who we just introduced above. And Andres Andrade has started 6 of their 18 games since the start of 2022, subbed in for 1, injured for 1, and not selected for 10. So as you can see, a bit of an outside candidate. We consider Andres Andrade a possible candidate. We have Kevin Galvin as a possible but unlikely candidate. So Kevin Galvin has been with Panama since 2018, just like Andres Andrade, but he's 27 years old and has only earned 5 caps in that time. He plays in Panama, and he was part of the Gold Cup 2019 squad as a substitute, but was off the team by the time the 2021 Gold Cup came around. He hadn't played since the 2019 Gold Cup. But he did return after an almost 4-year absence in March of 2023 to start one of their 2 remaining games. And he wasn't selected for the other. So making kind of a last-minute appearance is Kevin Galvin. But we have to consider him possible but unlikely, since he's been off the team for 4 years. Also possible but unlikely is Jose Matos. So Jose Matos is a young fella, and he's 21 years old, and has been with the team since 2022 with 1 cap. He plays for Universitario in Panama, and he got his first cap in March 2023, and as a substitute appearance in one of the 4 remaining games. He was with the under-23 teams. I kind of think something is going on this summer for the under-23 teams, because I think a couple of players have been called away for that. But we'll update that in the second part of the media cast that we're doing in June. Anyway, possible but unlikely candidate, Jose Matos. And then we'll leave it at that there. Yeah, I have one candidate who seems to be off the team, but he's a fairly minor figure, so we'll leave it at that. Let's move to right backs and start with. Actually, we're going to start with a player, a big player who is now off the team, Alfredo Machado. So kind of vacating the spot, if you will. Alfredo Machado was with Panama from 2008 to 2021. He's 37 years old now, so definitely aging out. But in his career, he got 93 caps and 2 goals. He's still playing club soccer in Panama with Arabe Unido. That's one of the bigger clubs in Panama, so I probably should be able to pronounce it better. I'll work on it. He's been with the Panama team since the 2011 Gold Cup, where he was a starter. However, from 2017, he kind of drifted off the team a bit. He was selected for the World Cup and the following 2 Gold Cups, but only as a substitute. So in 2021, and in 2019 Gold Cups, he only appeared in Game 3, where they had played a B team game. So he last appeared for the national team in the 2021 Gold Cup. So I imagine he's retired, being 30. Wait, that's 38 years old, I think, actually. Yes. Okay. Replacing him is Michael Murillo, who has also been around for a while. So we consider Michael Murillo a likely candidate. And Michael Murillo has been with Panama since 2016 and is 27 years old. And he has 64 caps and 6 goals. He plays for Anderlecht in Belgium. So one of the biggest clubs that a Panama player plays for. Anderlecht in Belgium since 2020 and has been part of the Gold Cup since 2017. Selected for the World Cup and the 2019 Gold Cup. However, not selected, to my surprise, for the 2021 Gold Cup, where he was selected for the 47-man preliminary squad and made the cut to 25, but didn't make the final cut there. So, however, since he has been very involved, starting 11 of their last 18 games and subbing in for 1. So we do consider Michael Murillo a likely candidate. Not sure what happened in 2021 for the Gold Cup there, but he's back. In addition to Michael Murillo, we have Caesar Blackman. So Caesar Blackman has been with the team since 2019 and is 25 years old. Just 12 caps there and no goals. And yes, the right back position is what we're talking about here. Caesar Blackman has recently moved to Slovan Bratislava in Slovakia, and he also played for the name that I dare not pronounce again. Okay, I'll try it. Donajska Streda. I think I did better last time. He was actually with them for a long time, along with his teammate there, Donajska Streda in Slovakia. Caesar Blackman has never made it to a tournament. He was on the preliminary squad for the 2019 Gold Cup, but he was out with an injury for the Gold Cup in 2021, so wasn't even placed on the preliminary squad there. He has since started 4 of their 18 games since the start of 2022, but he was on the bench for 7 others. So we consider him a likely candidate, kind of in second place there behind Michael Murillo. We have a couple of possible candidates, though, that might challenge for the spot. So the first one is Giovanni Ramos, and he has been with the team since 2020 and is 26 years old. So a bit of a latecomer to the squad. Only 11 caps and 0 goals, and he plays in Panama. And he was on the preliminary squad for the 2021 Gold Cup, but didn't make the final cut. He has since started 3 of their last 18 games, but subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 4. So he's kind of around and being considered, but not playing that much. Half of those matches he wasn't called up for. So Giovanni Ramos, a possible candidate. Also, Ivan Anderson as a possible candidate. He has been with Panama since 2019, and he is 22 years old. Oh, sorry, I'm mixing him up with another player. He's 25 years old and only has 6 caps. And he plays for Monagas in Venezuela and also hasn't made a Gold Cup squad yet. In fact, he was off the team for 17 months until he returned in June of 2022 and then started 3 of their remaining 9 games and was on the bench for 2 others. So Ivan Anderson, a possible candidate. A player who seems to be off the team is Francisco Palacios. So along with Machado Adolfo, I'm going to put Adolfo Machado as a retired player given his age. But with Francisco Palacios, it's just a matter of him not having been selected since the last Gold Cup. So Palacios is 32 years old, but a latecomer to the team since 2018. But he has 19 caps and 1 goal in that time, and he plays in Panama. So he had a good run with the team in the selected for the 2019 Gold Cup, where he was a substitute, but then a starter in the 2021 Gold Cup. There. So he seemed to be making good inroads to the squad, but then was not called up after that 2021 Gold Cup. So Francisco Palacios seemingly off the team. And Omar Cordoba, our last right back here, also seems to be off the team. He has been with Panama since 2021 and was also a latecomer to the squad. Because he's 28 years old, so about 26 when he got the first of his 4 caps. And he plays in Panama also and was on the squad for the 2021 Gold Cup, just as a substitute though, and last appeared for the national team in January 2022. So played a few games after that Gold Cup, but none recently. Okay, that brings us to the end of right backs and of defenders in general. So we move on to the midfield, and we're going to start with defensive midfielders, starting with definite candidate Ada Alberto Carrasquilla. Ada Alberto Carrasquilla has been with Panama since 2018 and is 23 years old, so quite young, but he has 40 caps already and 1 goal, so looks like an important player to them there, playing for Houston Dynamo in USA. He was with Cartagena in Spain prior to that. Was not selected until the 2021 Gold Cup, despite being with the team since 2018, but he was a starter in that 2021 Gold Cup, and has since started 10 of their 18 games since the start of 2022, as well as being subbed in for 4. So only 4 of those 18 matches that he wasn't selected for. Next, we have Anibal Godoy. Anibal Godoy as a likely candidate. And Godoy has been with Panama since 2010, one of the most recognizable names for me at least. 32 years old now, with a massive 127 caps and 4 goals. And he's playing for Nashville in the USA for the last several years. And he seemed to be off the team, actually. I thought he was one of those players who retired after the World Cup, because Panama had a number of players retire. Reaching the World Cup was kind of the pinnacle of their career, and he seemed to be off. However, he continued playing after that, and he was actually selected for the final squad for both the 2019 and 2021 Gold Cups, but he was injured before each tournament, and so has not played since the 2018 World Cup there. But since 2022, he has started 11 of their 18 games, was injured for 1 of them, and not selected for 5 others, including their last 2 matches. But barring him getting injured shortly before this tournament as well, we consider Annabelle Godoy a likely candidate. Okay, moving on, we have a possible candidate in Giovanni Welsh. So Giovanni Welsh has been with Panama since 2022, so a recent comer to the team, 23 years old. And he has 5 caps so far. He plays in Panama, but has recently been loaned to Académica in Portugal. So that's a move up there. And he got his first cap in January of 2022 and only started one of their remaining 18 games. But he was subbed in for 4. So perhaps we're being a bit generous putting him as a possible candidate. I just have a feeling about him that he will make inroads into the team. So Giovanni Welsh, a possible candidate. We have a possible but unlikely candidate. That's Abdiel Ayarza. So Abdiel Ayarza has been with the team since 2019, a real latecomer to the squad because he is 30 years old. But he's made the most of it with 22 caps and 5 goals. And he plays for Cusco in Peru, having played in Panama before that. So he was on the preliminary squad for the 2019 Gold Cup, which was a bit of a surprise because he hadn't even earned an appearance on the bench when he was named to that squad. But for the 2021 Gold Cup, he was selected and was a bench player, but they did use a B team in game 3, so he saw action there. And he started the first of their 18 games in 2022, and then he was subbed in for the next 3, and then on the bench for 5, and then not selected for 9 others, most recently appearing in March 2023. So, that's fairly recent, and he is in and around. But we have him as a possible but unlikely candidate because, as you saw, he was kind of drifting off the team steadily, it seemed. Finally, we have Victor Griffith, who is off the team and or seems to be off the team. He last appeared for the national team in the 2021 Gold Cup, although I do have one source, one of my lesser sources, has him playing a friendly in May 2022. But anyway, he was part of the Gold Cup 2021 squad, just a substitute there. And we won't go into detail on him because he seems to be off the squad, even if he did play in one friendly. Okay, let's move on to central midfielders, and we have Armando Cupa. We're starting with him because he's a big loss to them. He seems to be off the squad now. Also, his age is fairly advanced for a soccer player, so it could be a retirement. Also, he's actually 35 years old, so perhaps not as old as I thought, but still, that is getting towards the retirement age. He's been with the team, has Armando Cupa, since 2006 and has amassed 123 caps and 9 goals. And he has recently moved back to Arabe Unido in Panama. This is his 5th spell with them. He was actually unattached for about 9 months before that. And now he's back. And he's been with the team since 2011, the 2011 Gold Cup. And all the way, not always a starter, but he was in 2019 and 2021, a starter for the team. However, he last appeared for the national team in February of 2022. So that's, more than a year off the squad. So Armando Cupa seems to be off the squad. I don't have anything official saying he's retired. The next best candidate we have here is at the possible but unlikely level, and that's also a fairly experienced player in Miguel Camargo. So Miguel Camargo has been with Panama since 2014, and he's 30 years old with 34 caps and 3 goals. And he plays for San Francisco in Panama. He has played for some South American teams and in USA also. Has been with the team since the 2015 Gold Cup, but not selected for the World Cup in 2018 or in 2019. But he did return for the 2021 Gold Cup, where he was on the bench, again, just appearing in that B team game there, and was off the team after that for a while. So he returned after a 20-month absence. That's almost 2 years, but he was injured for 5 months of those. He returned in March 2023 and subbed into one of their remaining 2 games and was on the bench for the other. So he may be returning to the squad, but he's kind of been off it for so long that we consider him possible but unlikely. And at the same level is Martin Moran. So he's a new player since 2022 and a young player, so maybe up and coming, but doesn't seem to be his time yet. He's 21 years old and he got his first cap in September 2022 and had subbed into 2 games there, but then wasn't selected for the 5 others. So just getting a look in. Interestingly, though, he's with Independiente in Panama, but he was recently loaned to Itar in Bulgaria. So we saw another player above. I won't go searching for his name, but we saw another player playing in Bulgaria with Sofia Levski. He actually was loaned to Itar in Bulgaria, so it seems a bit of a pipeline there to a Bulgarian team. Okay, we move on now from central midfielders. So interesting there, like a lot of teams do have a lot of central midfielders, but Panama has very few in that position. So it'll probably be defensive midfielders or the left and right midfielders, who I'll get into now, will have to kind of fill in for them. We particularly have a lot of left wingers for Panama. That's the only midfield area where they're heavy, and every other one seems a bit light, despite their huge recruitment. But maybe this is the reason they were recruiting. And some of the players they found there might come in here to the Gold Cup. Let's continue with left midfielders, where we only have one possible candidate, Jose Murillo. So Jose Murillo has been with Panama since 2016 and is 27 years old, but just 13 caps and 1 goal. And he plays for Comunicaciones in Guatemala. I think that's the biggest team in Guatemala. And he was on the preliminary squad for the 2021 Gold Cup, but Jose Murillo didn't make the final cup there. In fact, was off the team after that cup, and he returned after a 15-month absence in June 2022 and started 3 of their remaining 9 games, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1, and not selected for 3 others. So kind of coming back into the team here, but we have Jose Murillo at the possible level. And we have Ricardo Avila at the possible but unlikely level. Ricardo Avila has been with Panama since 2016, but has only 8 caps in that time. But he's 26 years old, so still has time. He plays in Panama. He did play in Venezuela and USA, and actually in Belgium too, but is in Panama now. And he was part of the World Cup squad in 2018 as a substitute. But then he was not selected for the 2019 Gold Cup, and I thought he was off the team kind of for good there. But now he has come back after a 4.5-year absence, right at the end here in March 2023, to sub into one of their 3 remaining games. And he was also on the bench for 1. So another player making a last-minute bid to get back into the team there. That's all for left midfielders. So we move on to right midfielders, and we are a bit richer here with one definite and one likely candidate. The definite candidate is Cesar Yanes. So Cesar Yanes has been with Panama since 2020, even though he's 27 years old, and he has 40 caps and 3 goals. So he's been playing a lot recently. He plays in Panama, but he is on loan to Zamora in Spain, a couple of teams in Spain that he was loaned to. He was part of the Gold Cup squad in 2021, subbing into game 1 and then gaining a starting position after that. And he's since started 6 of their 18 games since the beginning of 2022, but also subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 3. So just 3 matches that he wasn't selected for, although doesn't have much claim for a starting position, but we'll see in the Cup. Anyway, definite candidate to make the squad, we think. And we have a likely candidate in Christian Martinez, sometimes called Christian Jesus Martinez. And he has been with Panama since 2016 and is 26 years old and has 26 caps and no goals. And he plays for a team in Saudi Arabia called Najran. And he was with Cadiz in Spain until recently. He was loaned out actually quite a bit from Cadiz, but and also with their B team, but was on their roster at least. He's another player who's really struggled to make it onto the squad. So he's been around since the Copa America Centenario in 2016 and has been selected for preliminary squads for most of the tournaments since, but hasn't actually been selected for any. But since the beginning of 2022, Christian Martinez has started 8 of their 18 games, and he was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 2. So just 4 games that he wasn't selected for recently. Maybe he will finally make it to a tournament. We have 3 candidates who are in the possible but unlikely. So the first is Omar Brown, who has been with the team since 2019. And the 29-year-old has just 13 caps and no goals. So he plays in Panama and was a substitute in the 2019 Gold Cup, but not even on the preliminary squad for the 2021 Gold Cup, and was off the team, in fact. He returned after a 14-month absence in March of 2023 and subbed into one of their last 2 games. So perhaps he, making a last-minute bid there, will get onto the team. But we consider him possible but unlikely, Omar Brown. Next is Irving Gudino. So Irving Gudino with Panama since 2020 and just 4 caps there, but he's young at 22 years old and plays in Panama. And he also returned after an absence, a 2-year absence in January of 2022, and just started one of their remaining 18 games and subbed in for 1. So less likely than Omar Brown, I would say. Irving Gudino, possible but unlikely. Finally, we have Victor Medina, and he also has been with the team since 2020 with 4 caps, but he's a bit younger at 22 years old. I felt Godino was 20. Well, they're both 22, but Medina was born in 2001. Anyway, Medina plays for Saprissa in Costa Rica, and he was not part of the 2021 Gold Cup squad, not even on the preliminary squad there. But he has started 3 of their 18 games since the start of 2022 and was on the bench for 2 besides. So a little bit more likely, it seems, than Irving Godino, but still possible but unlikely in our opinion. Okay, so we move on to left wingers, and this is the one position they are really rich in. So we have several candidates here. The first is Alberto Quintero, and he's a definite candidate. So yeah, probably some of these players will be selected, but maybe starting in other places in the midfield. So Quintero is a veteran. He's 35 years old and has 130 caps and 7 goals since his first cap for Panama in 2007. And he plays in Peru, and he's been part of Gold Cup squad since 2011, but didn't make the World Cup squad. He was injured for that one. He was selected, actually, but he broke his foot in a warm-up game against Norway, unfortunately. But he returned for the 2019 and 2021 Gold Cups, a starter in each of those. And he has since started 10 of their last 18 games and subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 1. So just 4 games that he's not selected for. However, on one of my sources, there's a little kind of stop sign. It's a red circle with a line through it. And all it says is he is called up to the national team until June 24th. So, there's a lot to unpack there. And I won't go into too much detail. But again, I wonder if there's something going on with the under-23 team. Of course, he would be an overage selection if there is. But I'll look into that and see if I can get more information for the June section of this podcast, of this media cast. So anyway, for the time being, Alberto Quintero, we consider a definite candidate, but there is a bit of an asterisk there. Okay, next we have Edgar Yol Barcenas as a likely candidate. So Yol Barcenas has been with Panama since 2014 and is 29 years old and has 72 caps and 5 goals. And he plays for Mazatlan in Mexico, and he was with Tijuana for several years before that. And Yol Barcenas, his first tournament was the 2017 Gold Cup. And he has been a starter in all tournaments since then, including the 2021 Gold Cup, he didn't start in the B team game there, but a starter nonetheless. Since the beginning of 2022, he has started 8 of their 18 games and subbed in for 5. So that is just 5 games that he was not called up for. So we consider Yol Barcenas or Edgar Yol Barcenas a likely candidate. Also likely as a newcomer, Freddy Gondola. So Freddy Gondola is not actually young. He is 27 years old, but he got his first cap in 2021. But he's sure making a good fist of it because he's got 14 caps now. He plays for Alajuelense in Costa Rica. And he started 3 of their 18 games since the start of 2022. But he was subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 3. For 3 games there, not selected for 7 games, but we do consider him a likely candidate, really kind of playing a lot in recent times. Next, we have a possible candidate in Jose Luis Rodriguez. So Jose Luis Rodriguez has been with the team since 2018 and is 24 years old. But he also has been playing a lot with 40 caps and 2 goals. And he plays with Famalicão in Portugal, having played for Alaves in Spain before that. So a bit of a world traveler. He's also played in Croatia and Belgium. So Jose Luis Rodriguez was part of the World Cup squad. That was his first tournament for Panama, and he was a starter in it. Started all 3 games there, but he wasn't a starter in the 2019 Gold Cup, but he became a starter in the 2021 Gold Cup there. So kind of a bit in and out as far as the starting lineup goes, but always seems to be on the squad. He started 5 of their last 18 games, as well as subbing in for 2 and being on the bench for 1. However, he was injured for the last 3. And actually not selected for the last 6 games. So 3 of those were due to injury. So, in addition to the doubt of not being selected for recent games, he has the injury. So we'll have to update that when we when we do the June podcast and see if he is back in action. Jose Luis Rodriguez, though, for now, we will keep him at the possible level, but on the injured list. Finally, at the possible level is Ricardo Phillips. So Ricardo Phillips is new to Panama since 2022 and is 22 years old. And he has 4 caps and no goals and plays in Panama. And he got his first cap in November 2022, and he started 2 of their remaining 6 games and was also subbed in for 2. So, however, he was not selected for the last 2 matches. So always a bit of a worry when that happens. And it is the case for both of our possible candidates, Jose Luis Rodriguez and Ricardo Phillips, that they didn't appear in the most recent games. Okay, and finally, I keep saying finally, and I shouldn't set that expectation. We have 2 possible but unlikely candidates in Ronaldo Cordoba. So Ronaldo Cordoba has been with Panama since 2016, but only has 6 caps. So he's 25 years old, 6 caps and 0 goals. He plays for Herrera, actually one of the smaller teams in Panama since 2023. And he was part of the picture back in 2017, where he was playing games for the for Panama, but not selected even for the preliminary squad for the Gold Cup that year, and then was out of the picture. However, he returned after a more than 5.5-year absence in June 2022 to start one of their remaining 9 games, and then he was subbed in for 1 and not selected for 7 others. So kind of on the very outskirts of the team is Ronald Cordoba, and we think it's possible but unlikely that he'll be selected for the squad. At the same level is Christian Quintero. So Christian Quintero has 3 caps since 2022, his first cap. He's 23 years old, and he plays in Uruguay for a club I've never heard of called La Luz in Uruguay. And he got his first cap in January 2022 and started 1 game and was subbed in for 2, but then not selected for the other 15. So Christian Quintero also on the outskirts of the squad, possible but unlikely. Okay, that's the end of the midfield section, and we move on to forwards. However, kind of like in the midfield, like they're very rich in the forward area, but don't have many candidates in the attacking midfield area. So I'm beginning to get a clearer picture of why they did that big recruitment thing, and maybe in June we'll kind of see which players come out of that. So I'm kind of expecting some unexpected players to be selected for the squad, and maybe Panama using this team to kind of build, kind of renew their squad. Anyway, for attacking midfielders, we only have 2 candidates at the possible but unlikely level, and the first is Angel Aurelian. Angel Aurelian has been with Panama since 2018 and has just 3 caps. He's 22 years old, and he plays for Sporting San Miguelito in Panama. And he was selected for the preliminary squad for the 2021 Gold Cup, even though he had been on the team since 2018. He wasn't a consideration in 2019. And he recently returned after a 15-month absence in September of 2022 to sub into one of their remaining 7 games. So very unlikely there, Angel Aurelian. Uziel Maltez, also possible but unlikely. So Uziel Maltez just got 1 cap in March of 2023, and he subbed into 1 of their remaining 4 games. That cap was a subbing in, so he wasn't selected for the 3 others. So maybe we'll see him down the road, Uziel Maltez, but it doesn't look likely for this cup. That's it. That's all we have for attacking midfielders. So as I say, apart from the left wing position, Panama is quite thin in the midfield. For forwards, we have a likely candidate in Ismail Diaz. So Ismail Diaz has been with Panama since 2014 and has 24 caps and 5 goals. He's 26 years old, and he plays in Chile for Universidad Católica in Chile. He also played for Académico in Portugal. That's the second player we saw associated with them. So maybe a bit of a relationship between those two clubs. And he was a shock selection for the 2016 Copa Copa America Centenario. I won't go into too much detail on this because it's a bit of a long story, but he was a shock selection and then he withdrew from the tournament and came back in 2017 to play in the Gold Cup. He was a sub in the 2018 World Cup, but then got injured during that tournament and then struggled to get on the team since. So was not part of the 2019 and 2021 Gold Cups. So a long history with Panama, Ismail Diaz, but recent history shows him with six starts in their 18 games since the start of 2022, and also subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 4. So he seems to be playing regularly recently, at least, and we have Ismail Diaz as a likely candidate. Next, we look at veteran Gabriel Torres, but we only have him at the possible level. Gabriel Torres recently passed his Centurion 100 caps, so he has 104 caps now, and he's 34 years old. He has 26 goals, so about a 24% scoring rate, which is pretty good. And he plays for Zamora in Venezuela and has been all over the place in Mexico and Chile and USA with a lot of squads, a lot of clubs. His first tournament was the 2011 Gold Cup, and he's been part of every tournament since then, including the World Cup in 2018, where he was a substitute. And he was a starter in the 2019 Gold Cup, but back to being a substitute for the 2021 Gold Cup. So a bit in and out in terms of whether he's a starter or not, but definitely in as far as being selected for tournaments goes. So Gabriel Torres has started 3 of their 18 games since the start of 2022 and subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 3. So that is 9, and he was called up for 9 games and not called up for 9 games. And oddly, though, on the primary website that I use for this information, his record stops after the end of June 2022. So that's a bit odd, perhaps suggesting that he announced his international retirement, although I didn't see anything when I searched for that. But there is, I'll call it a suggestion of retirement for him. But we have him as a possible candidate, although he didn't play since June 2022. But he is such a stalwart for Panama that they might select him if he's available. We have possible candidate Jose Fajardo. Jose Fajardo has been with Panama since 2017, and he has 31 caps and 5 goals. And we saw another player with Cusco in Peru. He is also with them, having played in Ecuador before that. And he was a starter in the 2019 Gold Cup. That was his first tournament. So on the preliminary squad for the World Cup in 2018, but didn't make the final cup. A starter in the 2019 Gold Cup, but just a substitute in the 2021 Gold Cup there. And recently he started 4 of their 18 games since the start of 2022, as well as subbing in for 3 and being on the bench for 1. So he too has been called up for about half of the games. But he also has a little stop sign next to his name, as we saw with, I can't remember who it was. It was with Alberto Quintero. And next to the stop sign for him, it says he is called up to the national team until July 6th. So whereas Quintero, his call up to the national team, whatever that means, lasted until the beginning of the Gold Cup, Fajardo's lasts well into the Gold Cup. So again, a bit of an asterisk there, but we're not sure what it means. We'll look into it and hopefully have an answer in the second part of the podcast here, or MediaCast, I've been calling it. Jose Fajardo, I do know how to say it. I'm just, my mouth is just broken. Jose Fajardo will keep at the possible level despite that asterisk. And we also have Alfredo Stevens at the possible level. So he's been with the team since 2012. Stevens has, but has only 12 caps and 1 goal in that time. 26 caps. The word only applies to the 1 goal because 26 caps and 1 goal, that's about a 4% ratio, very low for someone coded as a forward. He plays in Venezuela and has been in Ecuador before that, and was part of the 2015 Gold Cup squad, but that was his last tournament appearance. All the way up until the 2021 Gold Cup. He didn't appear there either. He started 2 of their 18 games since the start of 2022, was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1. So honestly, I got to move him down to possible, but unlikely with that record that I see. His recent appearances too thin to justify the possible designation there. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Cecilio Waterman. I expected him to be a bit higher than the possible level, but we'll see with you if you agree with me when we read out his participation. So Cecilio Waterman has been with Panama since 2010 and is 32 years old. With 25 caps and 8 goals, and he plays for Cobrasol in Peru. And he's been with several South American teams there. Now he was a starter in the 2013 Gold Cup, and then disappeared from the squad for 6 years. And he was actually selected for the 2021 Gold Cup, but he received a positive COVID test there. However, in World Cup qualifying, he scored 7 goals and was the top scorer for the team. That's why I kind of expected him to be a bit more of a feature here. However, he's only started 4 of their 18 games since the start of 2022. And he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. So despite Cecilio Waterman's good scoring record during World Cup qualification, is only called up for 6 of their 18 games. So we have to put him at the possible level. And our last candidate at that level is Azarias Londono. So Azarias Londono has been with Panama since 2022 and has just 1 cap. He's 22 years old and he plays for Alianza in Panama. And he got his first appearance on the bench in June of 2022 and started 1 of their remaining 10 games and then was on the bench for 3 others. So that makes him, in our opinion, a possible candidate. And we have 2 players who seem to be off the team, but are fairly big names for the team. The first is Rolando Blackburn. So Rolando Blackburn has been with Panama since 2010 and has 54 caps and 12 goals. And he is 33 years old now, and he is back in El Salvador. Not back in El Salvador. He is recently moved to El Salvador, playing for their biggest team, FAS, in El Salvador, having recently been with Costa Rica's biggest team, or at least one of them, in Alajuelense in Costa Rica. So a bit of a traveler also. He's played in several countries and has been kind of in and out of the Panama team. So he was a substitute in the 2013 and 15 Gold Cups, but then off the team between 2016 and 2018, at least as far as tournaments go. So on the preliminary squad for the World Cup there, but didn't make the final cut. But Rolando Blackburn came back for the 2019 Gold Cup and was a starter in the 2021 edition, and scored 2 goals in that competition, as well as scoring 4 goals in World Cup qualifying, World Cup 2022 qualifying. So, kind of making recent, or seemed to be making a recent comeback. However, he last appeared for the national team in June of 2022. So he's been off the team for a year. And hard to say with Orlando Blackburn, because he kind of really does come in and out for Panama. Finally, we have Jorman Aguiar. So Jorman Aguiar was with the team, but he's more out than in. At 27 years old, he just has 9 caps and 1 goal for Panama, and was with them from 2015 to 21. So he never made a tournament until the 2021 Gold Cup, where he appeared as a substitute, but that was his last appearance for the national team. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our look at the candidates. And so we will come back in June, which will just be immediately for you. Come back in June when we know the final roster and go through these candidates again, tell you which ones made it and which ones didn't. It's June and we're back for part 2 of Panama's players, and welcome back those who came from part 1, and welcome anew to those who are joining us just for the short version. So to orient you, I will say that in part 1 we created a list of players based mostly on their recent participation, and we categorized those players into their positions and then into how likely they were to reach the cup, how likely we think they are to reach the cup. And you'll see that list shortly, because we're going to go through it again. And well, without further delay, let's begin. I should just say in general that Panama basically went as expected, so no B team here. And let's begin with manager Thomas Christiansen. So yes, no changes there, and so we will consider him as having made the squad, which we'll highlight in green for those watching on YouTube. Let's look at goalkeepers. So we had one definite candidate in Orlando Mosquera, and he has made the squad. And Luis Medria, who we had as a likely candidate, also making the squad. But a bit of a surprise, we thought Jose Guerra was likely. And just for those joining the short version of the podcast, we discussed the reasons why we placed players at the level we did in the first part of the podcast. So Jose Guerra, for example, started 8 of their 18 games since the start of 2022 and was on the bench for 2 others. And so we considered him a likely candidate, but he has not made the squad, actually not made the preliminary squad even. So yes, if you want that kind of information, that's what we talked about in part 1. Possible candidate, Emerson Dimas, was only enough for the preliminary squad there, and we had considered Jose Calderon a possible but unlikely candidate, and he did not make the preliminary squad there. However, the third goalkeeper is a new candidate, and it is Cesar Zamudio. So we didn't talk about him in the first part of the podcast because he got his first call up as a substitute in January 2022 and had started one of their games and was also on the bench for 8 and not selected for 11 others. However, he was called up for the last 4 matches, so perhaps he should have been on our radar, but he wasn't. But now he is, because he is selected to the Gold Cup squad here. He plays for Independiente in Panama, but is currently on loan to Marathon. I think that's ending this summer. And he got that 1 cap in 2023, actually in the last of the in one of the warm-up games. That's why he wasn't on our radar. Anyway, I will continue on to defenders, and we begin with central defenders, and we have quite a few of them. Definite candidate Fidel Escobar did make the squad, and so did likely candidate Harold Cummings. We had 3 possible candidates, the first of whom was Eduardo Anderson, and he did make the squad, but the other 2 just made the preliminary squad. That is Jose Cordoba and Edgardo Farina, just the preliminary squad for them. And we also had 3 possible but unlikely candidates, but in fact 2 of them made the preliminary squad, and the first was Richard Peralta, and the second was Carlos Harvey. However, Gilberto Hernandez, the third of our possible but unlikely candidates, did not even make the preliminary squad. All right, moving on to left backs, we had Eric Davis only as a likely candidate, even though he's a real veteran. He wasn't participating as much as we would need for a definite candidate, but nevertheless he is selected for the squad. Possible candidate Roderick Miller also selected, along with Andres Andrade. Those 2 possible candidates making the final squad, and the 2 possible but unlikely candidates, Kevin Galvin and Jose Matos, just selected for the preliminary squad there. Okay, right backs. Adolfo Machado we started with because he was a veteran on his way out. So even though he started a big game in the Gold Cup in 2021, he seems to be off the squad now, having last played in that Gold Cup. So we call him retired, even though he still is playing club soccer. We had 2 likely candidates in Michael Murillo and in Caesar Blackman, and both of those made the final squad. And then 2 possible candidates in Giovanni Ramos and Ivan Anderson, and both of those just made the preliminary squad. And our 2 candidates as seemingly off the squad turn out to be so, as they didn't even make the preliminary squad. That's Francisco Palacios and Omar Cordoba. So we get high points on our predictions there for the right back position. And let's move on to the midfield, where we begin with defensive midfielders, and our definite candidate, Adalberto Carrasquilla, has made the Gold Cup squad, and so has the likely candidate, Anibal Godoy. Possible candidate, Giovanni Welsh. I think in part 1 I had a good feeling about him making it, and indeed he did, to the final squad. And possible but unlikely candidate, Abdiel Ayarza, only making the preliminary squad there. And Victor Griffith, who we thought seemed to be off the squad, does seem to be off the squad, as he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. For central midfielders, we started with a veteran that seemed to be leaving the squad, Armando Cooper. So he has 123 caps, but he hadn't played since February 2022. So we thought he was off the squad, and that seems to be the case, as he was not selected for the preliminary squad. Otherwise, we only had 2 central midfielders at the possible but unlikely level, and the first was Miguel Camargo. and the other was Martin Moran. And neither of those were selected for the final squad. They both made the preliminary squad. So it looks like there will have to be some players playing out of position. That's a very thin central midfield. And those players are not going to come from the left of midfield because we're thin there too, with just possible candidate Jose Murillo and possible but unlikely candidate Ricardo Avila. And neither of those made the final squad either, both of those on the preliminary squad. So right midfielders, though, we had a few more names, but only a couple of likely or higher candidates. So definite candidate was Cesar Yanis, and he has made the final squad, as well as likely candidate Christian Martinez. Christian Martinez will be at the Gold Cup. But we had three players at the possible but unlikely level, and all of them were selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. So those are Omar Brown, Victor Medina, and Irving Gudino. Victor Medina and Irving Gudino. Okay, so not a lot of coverage from the right midfield. However, we do have a lot of candidates as left wingers, so maybe they will have to cover the central midfield spot. First, we have definite candidate Alberto Quintero, and he has made the final squad. And likely candidates Edgar Yol Barcinas and Freddy Gondola. Both making the squad. So Edgar Yol Barcinas and Freddy Gondola will be in the Gold Cup. We had a couple of possible candidates, and the first was Jose Luis Rodriguez, and he was not selected even for the preliminary squad, but the other possible candidate, Ricardo Phillips, was. So moving on, we had two possible but unlikely candidates, and both of them made it to the preliminary squad, Ronaldo Cordoba and Christian Quintero, but not to the final squad for either of those players. Okay, we had an injury doubt on Jose Luis Rodriguez, and he was reported as injured, a bit of a confusing report because his international record had him recovered from injury, but his club record reported him as injured. Anyway, perhaps that's the reason he wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad there. But all of the other candidates, either the preliminary or the final squad. All right, so we move on to forwards because we don't have any players coded as right wingers. So overall, it looks like the midfield is pretty thin there. I guess some of the defensive midfielders can play as central midfielders, but there were a few positions there that look a bit thin. Okay, let's move on to forwards, and we have a no definite candidate. Actually, for attacking midfielder, we only have two possible but unlikely candidates. The first is Angel Aurelian, and he made the preliminary squad. The second is Uziel Maltez, and he did not even make the preliminary squad. We don't have any secondary strikers here either, so we move on to forwards, and they do have a lot of forwards. So we begin with the likely candidate, Ismael Diaz, and he seemed to be at the top of the list with no definite candidates there. So Ismael Diaz making the final squad. Another veteran leaving the squad, it seems, is Gabriel Torres. We did have him as a possible candidate, but it seems like Tejada there that he is not on the squad. He has 104 caps, there and is 35 years old. So Gabriel Torres not named to the preliminary squad even. Jose Fajardo was the second possible candidate, and he did make it to the final squad, as did Cecilio Waterman, another possible candidate. And the other possible candidate, Azarias Londono, also making it to the final squad. So a lot of forwards there making it. Now, I got a bit confused there because on my list, I had Alfredo Stevens as a possible candidate, but on the screen he's possible but unlikely. So I think we probably moved him during part one of the podcast. After going over his information, we decided he was possible but unlikely, and it looks like we made the right decision because he only made the preliminary squad, Alfredo Stevens. And then two players who seem to be off the squad. Rolando Blackburn actually did make the preliminary squad, but Jorman Aguiar did not make the preliminary squad even. Okay, so that is the list of players, and now we finish by summarizing a little bit of the information. So we will begin with notable non-selections. And the first one is Jose Guerra, the goalkeeper who we had thought a likely candidate, but not selected for the squad. We'll just mention a couple of maybe veterans. We didn't actually expect them to be selected, but they are kind of familiar names leaving the team, it seems, and not part of this Gold Cup. So Jose Calderon, the goalkeeper, with 44 caps and with the team since 2005, is not selected for this cup or even for the preliminary squad. Armando Cooper, since 2006, he's been with Panama, and Gabriel Torres from 2005. Now, we had given Jose Calderon, the goalkeeper, a possible but unlikely. Armando Cooper, we felt was off the squad, and Gabriel Torres, we had actually considered a possible candidate, but none of them actually making even the preliminary squad. So our next section is surprise inclusions, and actually we don't have any. All of the players who made it to the squad, to the final squad, were either from our possible, likely, or definite category. We just had one player who was a new player. We'll introduce him shortly. And yes, but no surprises for Panama, a fairly predictable squad. There was one mild surprise on the preliminary squad, and that was the return of Abdiel Arroyo. So Abdiel Arroyo last played for Panama. He was on the bench in November 2020. Because he'd been gone from the team for a long time, we didn't include him in part one. But lo and behold, he was back at least to the preliminary squad there. And there were about 5 players who were in that situation. We didn't talk about them in part one because they seemed long gone from the squad, but they did get named to the preliminary squad. We also had about 8 players who were brand new. Actually, Cesar Samudio, the goalkeeper who was selected, was among them. They're players who were not on our radar. They've really never stepped onto the field for Panama. So we won't go through them, but they're probably players who may appear in the future. But we need them to kind of do something like play games for Panama for them to grab our attention. And yes, we do have one new player, and that is Cesar Samudio. So just came up to the team in the warm-up games. There was just a substitute once before that. And yeah, that's it for new players. And finally, for injuries, we don't really have any injury concerns for Panama either. Just one player who was injured, but not a strong candidate. In fact, he hadn't even made our radar, or he had made our radar, but he hadn't made it into part one of the media cast. That's because he came back after a 10-month absence, subbed into one game in September 2022, and then was gone again. So that is Eduardo Guerrero. So Eduardo Guerrero was out with a muscle injury and an unknown return date. He picked it up in late May, which was probably after he was named to the preliminary squad. But we believe he would not have made the squad anyway. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the player podcast for Panama. So we hope this deepens your enjoyment of the Cup when you watch them and know a little bit about them.